It's the man, the myth, the creator of Fallout, and absolute godfather of gaming. Why don't play online games anymore? Mm, mm, well, I mean, I usually play with friends, but I'm the type of guy that I can play both online and offline. But I do find myself playing more offline because, well, I switched from Xbox to PC, and, well, most of the people I played with when I was in college are on Xbox. I mean, and on PC, well, most of the guys I play with work the different hours. But, I mean, if we want to make this as general as possible, right? I mean, most experiences that will stop people from playing online are like maybe cheaters or griefers, or I guess if a game has less content, right? Or yeah, I'd say cheaters, griefers, lack of content, maybe the change in meta are absolutely erasing the meta in online games. I'm really thinking of games I played online, like Halo, Call of Duty, Killzone. When I played on the PlayStation of one of my colleagues, one of the people at college, in For Honor. But I think what killed For Honor was there's this thing called a meta in competitive games. So there are characters that are just objectively better than others, and if that wasn't the case, they would all just have the same move set. But no, I mean and again, that doesn't mean you only need to play the characters right, but it just means as the game evolves, the top players will create the meta, characters that are just, better than others or can do certain things better than others. And Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat was the same way, right? And this is something that's just natural, but I do believe metas also kind of kill games because it's not fun if you just want to play the character, and it's not that you're bad or anything, it's just that you want to play the character that you like, but another character from someone who's actually good, objectively better at the game, that with an objectively better character comes at you, right? Like, is that you mainly just play with friends at that point, but if you want to climb the ladder, Street Fighter is like Bison, right? If you're, I mean, but I think that's something you might get into. But yeah, that's just my synopsis before the video.
Hi everyone, it's me, Tim.
I keep forgetting to do this. Let's put in the earphones. I don't know. Well, I'm coming off doing my previous video. Earphones. Let's switch this to that. All right.
Today I want to talk about why I don't play online games much anymore. And I'm particularly talking about multiplayer. And I did it for a long time. I mean, multiplayer games have been around for a long time. I'm
Yeah, I mean, and you had the 360, which revolutionized multiplayer gaming with the party chat. And it's like this Mandela effect because people are like, oh no, the PlayStation 3 always had party chat. I'm like, no. It didn't start having a party chat until a couple months before PlayStation 4 came out. But many people don't understand. Obviously, all games have an in-game chat, right? But the party chat really revolutionarized competitive gaming and competitive play, right? Because now it's you and four other goofballs or three other goofballs actually communicating with each other.
I'm not just talking about, you know, giant MMOs. Even the consoles that started coming out in the late 70s, like the Atari VCS, it supported a lot of two-player games and even a lot of four-player games. And most of the consoles back then did. They usually had two ports in the front, or they and frequently the second port could have a tap that would allow multiple controllers.
Go to others,
So that's how
yeah.
you would play two and four people games. And then in the late
Yeah, I think with computers, like Doom kind of had the same thing, like two and four players. Yeah.
80s, and I have a whole video on this, I really got into MUDs, especially LP MUD. And that's something you play online. It was just a text based game, but I was playing that with dozens of people simultaneously from all over the world. And that was really exciting, and it really made me think this is what multiplayer can do. Then in the mid 90s, when I was at Interplay, we used to get together one night a week. I called it the Thursday night thing. And we would play 5-person Super Nintendo, one controller in the first tap, and then 4 controllers and a multi-tap into the second port. We'd play 5-person Super Nintendo games. We had Lynxes, Atari Lynxes, and those supported a ton of 2 and 4-person games, and quite a number of 6-player games, and even 1 or 2 8-player games.
Yeah, and consoles were actually relatively expensive back then, even though they weren't as uh, accessible. I think computers were kind of the same way. And again, those were definitely in the times where gaming just wasn't a popular thing culturally, and well, with the consoles being expensive, it was even less so. So yeah, I'm surprised you're saying even in the fucking 70s, right? Because yeah, that's a long fucking time, and to have multiplayer then.
So we were playing multiplayer a ton. Then in the 90s, especially the late 90s, Ultima Online and EverQuest came out. And that just was like mind blowing. Thousands of people on a server, graphical. Just so much fun. In fact, I have a whole video about EverQuest is in my top 5 games ever. I mean, I loved EverQuest, but I don't play games like that anymore. And people try to get me to play games, and they were like, hey, I thought you liked, and they list all these games. And I realized that there's 3 big things that make me stop playing multiplayer games. The first one is grouping with people. The second one is all the griefing that happens.
Yeah, yeah.
And then unrelated to the griefing, the third one is a lot of toxicity. And I'll talk about why that's different than the griefing. Griefing is kind of toxicity, a form of toxicity, but it's a very specific form. So the first one I want to talk about, grouping. When I first started playing MMOs, it was super fun to play with people, and most of them are designed that you can't solo past a certain level in your class or past a certain area.
Yeah, I think World of Warcraft was the same way, right? It's like you can kind of get pretty far on your own, kind of. I mean, you'll be struggling when you get later on, but yeah, there's certain content where you had to play with people for it. Again, the reason that content existed was to to encourage multiplayer gaming with 30, 40, 50 people raids, right? That was the point, you know.
Now, some of the classes, I'll talk about EverQuest for a second. Some of the classes like Druid and Necromancer, you could solo well past where the other classes could solo, because these classes were fairly powerful and they had a pretty powerful pet. Or with Druids, you could move really quickly and you had lots of spells that you could cast while moving. Lots of dots. So it was called kiting, where you just ran in front of the monster and dotted it to death. You could do that, but that's not really what they were designed for. In fact, a lot of the content was designed to require groups. There were dungeons you were not going to ever solo in. There were whole planes of existence and raids that you were never going to solo. In fact, they required sometimes way more than a 5-person group. So it's kind of makes sense. It's an MMO. It's a multiplayer online experience. It's designed to be grouped. But finding a group could be a pain in the butt. Guilds were really poorly supported back then. It was some of them you could tell was an afterthought. There weren't a lot of tools for making a guild, contacting your guild, organizing a guild, finding what guilds were available. These are some of the things I wanted to try to tackle in WildStar when I got a chance to make an MMO later. So just finding a guild could be tough. So I frequently just had a regular group of here's me and 4 or 5 people who would like to play regularly. But picking a day where you and 5 other people could always meet, that was hard. Getting them to all log.
Yeah, I'd say that's even harder today. And, well, it's for a completely different reason, right? You know, when you're younger, it's, you know, if you're playing with people across the world, different time zones, like, could be 9 p.m. at one place, 12 a.m. at another. Well, it's all, but, you know, as adults, it's, you know, even having time to do it, even if it's after work, right? Because maybe you have kids, a nagging wife. Maybe like me, I take most of my work home just to get it done, and it's difficult to. If you're like, okay, we're going to do a raid this day at this time. Again, if it's Eastern, Western, or if people they might be 100% be available, but then some comes up last minute and they're not, right? And that destroys the entire dynamic because if he's the tank, right? If the point of him is to take damage, it's like okay, you lost maybe your best tank and maybe you have one more, right? And yeah, and again, it's even this way with CAD. Like, I guess Warframe is a more now it's more casual, but back then when you had very few primes out, or I don't even think there were many primes out. There weren't as many mods, weren't as many weapons, as many even Warframes out. Like you kind of had to stack for late game content. Nowadays, all the Warframes, there's so many mods that are so powerful that I can play most of it alone. I just play with people just, you know, to fuck around. But back then, you know, you had to have that person that built up the Trinity, who was one of the best supports in the game. You had to have that one person that had the tank. You had to have that one person that had crowd control, Bobbin, right? And trying to get everyone together. If one person can't come, like maybe you could, you know, switch someone else out as the CC, but they might not have the character fully built up. They might not really much know the character. They might have to play a different type of CC, right? And that kind of ruins the dynamic. I mean, it's things out of your control, but it's just the way it is.
Log in at the same time was a nightmare. You'd often say, let's play at 9. Of course, you'd log in at 9 and no one would be there. But by like 9:15, still some people weren't there. And then 9:30, some people are there, but now some of the group is off shopping. They're like, hey, I'm going to go buy and sell some material.
It's like you'd show up and it's like, okay, so now everyone's here. Well, I'm not just going to sit here, at least for World of Warcraft. It's like, well, you have people come in and they don't see anyone, so they go AFK. Then more and more people come in and, you know, they see people AFK and they're like, oh, I guess I'll go shopping. Right? It was very difficult.
Or, I forgot I logged out on the other side of the world. I have to run there. It'll be another 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So sometimes you could wait 45 minutes just for your group to get started, and you only have a 2-hour window that you agreed on because some of them have to leave. You know, they've got a job, or they're like, yeah, I told my spouse I'd be done at 11 p.m., so I'm tapping out at 11. And especially if that person who can't play is someone you absolutely need in the group, it's like, we can't play without the tank, we can't play without the healer. Yeah, you pretty much stop playing. And also, I will admit myself, I often felt overcommitted. Like sometimes I'd come home and yeah, it's Wednesday and it's the weekly MMO night. I just don't feel like playing. I had a rough day. I don't really feel like diving in. But if I don't log in, they can't play because maybe I'm the damage dealer, maybe I'm the crowd control guy. So if I don't log in, they can't play. So you feel
Yeah, that's another aspect, right? I like playing games, but I don't like being obligated to play the game. I mean, I play for fun. Like even though I am competitive, right? You know, it's part that's mainly part of the fun. But yeah, there's maybe that demographic of people that treat it like, oh no, I have to have this, I have to get this, or if I'm playing with my friends, you know, I have to get up to where they are, so it must be done. And I mean, the first Descendant was kind of like this because took so fucking much time and grind to even get level your character up to where all the slots are filled with all the mods. You need polarities and all the mod slots. And that's a lot of one doing the same boring bullshit over and over just to level. And they made it easier now, but before then there was one good leveling spot, but it wasn't really much good for anything else, right? But it's also playing with people like if you fight like the Colossi, you know, playing with people just makes it better. But playing with people you can like communicate with makes it objectively better, right? Because certain bosses require certain gimmicks to get it done, and it's like, well, I don't want to feel obligated to do this because I'm not having fun. And you will have that group of people who, oh, I need this character to be better, so I'll just buy the character, right? Just so I can skip the grinding process. And I'll just buy reactors or just buy catalysts with money just to skip that aspect. And again, that's just one demographic of players, and it's okay. If I'm playing like that, I'm not having fun. It's like if I'm playing a game and I'm not having fun or I'm not enjoying the play, even if I'm competitive, why am I playing that game? Like I'll just play Warframe, which I have everything. It's funner. You don't gotta go through all the hoops to get a good character. I mean,
committed to doing it. And so it starts to feel like, is this a is this fun or is this a second job I picked up?
yeah,
Um, Another feature of a lot of MMOs and even multiplayer games in general is there are areas that because you have to do them as a group, you sometimes have to redo them because if on your first playthrough you didn't get far enough, you may have to restart. If you log out, the thing repopulates.
yep.
And sometimes it's even worse than that. There was an area in EverQuest called Befallen that you had to play and get a key to open the next part of the dungeon. If you didn't get that key when you were going through, then if you left and said we're see you all next Wednesday, you have to play the whole dungeon again to try to get that key.
Yep.
And I don't know if it was Befallen or other ones, but some of them had keys that didn't survive if you logged out. Meaning, you not only had to get the key, you pretty much had to do the dungeon in one long play session. And if you didn't, you had to restart it next time. So sometimes redoing content like that, it got kind of boring after a while. And it led to a second problem of syncing content. If one person missed a night, they may not be able to rejoin you. Now, with the Befallen one, that was fine. If one person came late or hadn't joined, as long as one person had the key, he could let everybody in. But if they hadn't played for a while and their level was suddenly too low, there was some really tight level capped things or level restrictions in EverQuest, and especially every 5 levels you seem to get a lot more powerful. One person misses, gets a couple levels behind, they may not be able to join you again, maybe ever again. So that was a tough thing to keep your group synchronized. So as if all that wasn't bad enough, griefing became a huge problem in Ultima Online and in EverQuest. Now, don't get me wrong, people have been doing griefing forever. There was griefing on LP Mods.
Yeah, there's always that demographic of people I'll just play and just be douchebags just out of nowhere. And it's with any multiplayer game. I remember one thing. I played World of Warcraft very briefly in uh, Burning Crusade on the goofy ass netbooks in high school. But there's this type of like engineering. Well, if you do the engineering class, there are specific types of, say, gear or specific types of equipment you could make, and one of them was, I think it was the what goblin. It was goblin equipment, right? And when you made goblin like weapons or goblin tools or goblin, that subsect of engineering, when you made anything from that, it was okay, it was powerful, but it had a chance to damage you and the people around you. So, what people would do is that they would power down, and with one character, they will power down engineering, right? Which was to get to the good stuff that did a lot of damage, even if it failed. You had to be relatively like late game. They do that, go to a level 1 area with bank alts, like so alternate accounts that you specifically use for banking. They will use the ability and kill level 1 bank alts permanently. Like they'd be gone. That account, everything in there would just evaporate. Now, if you were that bank alt account, you will be fuming because you probably had so much, like, maybe not like, because obviously bank alts aren't really the fighter type account characters. They probably have just a lot of shit on them. And if you lost that shit permanently, you were fucking fuming. That's a lot of shit just gone. Just Thanos snapped.
People used to grief on the Lynx games all the time. There was a game called Slime World that lets you find a mega bomb, and people used to go, throw mega bombs at people just to blow up them rather than take out the monsters. They were just trying to take out the other players. And yes, that happened. But when you're playing in the same room with people, they tended to cut that out after a while. Yep. Not in MMOs. Once people became anonymous like that, they became kind of like jerks.
Yeah.
And the early MMOs seemed unprepared for it. But looking back at it now, I think what they really were unprepared for, they weren't surprised griefing happened, but they were surprised at the cleverness of the techniques people used to grief and the absolute sheer volume of the griefing.
Yeah, never underestimate someone's need to be an asshole, right? And with World of Warcraft, when you had ninja looters, like so people that would sit back, wait for a group to kill a boss, then they'd come in and steal the loot, with effectively not doing anything right. Your account was your name was intrinsically linked to your account, and you cannot change it. So if you were a ninja looter in World of Warcraft, you would effectively get blacklisted by other clans, right? And they'll be like, don't hire this guy with this name because he ninja loots. And that was your incentive not to be an asshole. Now clearly, people still were, right? But what destroyed this was the fact that you could pay, like, I don't know, $10 to change your name to be whatever it wants. So now, as long as you effectively pay for the right to be an asshole, as long as you shill out more money, and that completely destroyed the landscape of World of Warcraft, because now, again, it was a monetary incentive for Blizzard to allow griefing.
Happened. People found ways to grief that they didn't anticipate. Even though you could mark it so like these players can't be attacked or killed by another player, they would do things like train a guard or get in combat with another monster and then bring it over near you and now you're involved. And if they were higher level than you, they could train a guard onto you. The guard can't hurt them, but it would destroy you. That happened a lot. People also found ways to trick people, where they would say, "Hey, let's do a trade," and they put items in, and then you put your money up, and then they pull the item off and hit trade, and bam, you're out of your money. They would do things called corpse runs, because if you die, they're like, "Hey, I'll bring your corpse to you. Just give me permission to drag it." As soon as you give them permission to drag it, that also gave them permission to loot it.
Yep.
Which you could argue was a really bad design, but a lot of people didn't know that. They just thought, "Oh, I'm letting them have permission to drag it." They'd then go find their body. They go grab the body and take stuff off of it. Even if they only could get permission to drag it, they would do things like drag it into a lava pool. So there was no way you were going to get it back. So now you've lost all your things. So even when they restrict it to just dragging, they can still grief you. People were clever. In some ways, I looked at this, wow, people spent half this much cleverness in their real life. They'd be millionaires.
Yeah, and I think for like, you get a lot of like RuneScape scams where it's like, oh, if you give me this much stuff, I'll get back with you. And the same thing happens in Warframe. I don't understand how people fall for this. They're like, oh, I'll hold this much and this and that for you, and I'll get back with you with what you want. And I guess people fall for that because, I mean, people still do that type of goofy shit.
But the thing that was weird is, even without griefing, people found ways to be absolutely annoying. I had heard from some of my group that I played EverQuest with were women, and they said their female characters got harassed all the time. So when we played EverQuest and we restarted a new group once, a theme group of the Spice Girls called the Spicy Girls, and I was playing a female character, oh my god, I would get hit on. People were always sending me private messages and stuff. It was crazy. And I was like, is this what women go through online? It was...
Yes. I mean, we're talking probably, a bunch of dudes that don't have a social life. They can't interact with women in real life. Maybe they're autistic. Maybe, they're not really that. So it's why they're playing, like, EverQuest or World of Warcraft. It's to augment that social reality. But yeah, I mean, if you pull from just that group, like, inevitably you're going to get one, right? One or two or three that don't know how to fucking act, right? And I know there were some guilds that just would not hire female character players because of this. And obviously now people would scream sexist, but you had odd situations where it just created drama just out of nowhere, right? Just drama. Because, and it's like, well, what the fuck? I'm trying to run a guild. And again, most people, like, most guild masters will just always side with the person who actually contributes the most. But there's been a few situations that I've heard where a guild master just sided with just some random character. One of the guild officers sided with just some random character that was a female, or at least they said they were female. And, well, odd situations, but yeah, unfortunately those things happen. Now, should anything be done about it? I mean, seeing how things are done nowadays, where online harassment laws are a thing, like in the UK, you can be thrown in jail for harassment online. So it's like, okay, if Susie's being a bitch, right, and I just need to express that, if I need to put that into words and say, you are being a bitch. If you do it in real life, it's like the consequences are minimal. But if you do it over social media or over a game, it's a crime, right? And you have situations where Ubisoft, where they call the police on their paying fucking customers and they gloat about it, right? Again, and I have we had the foresight, right? Okay, I don't know if it was better back then or worse, but again, having your character linked to your name and not being able to change that gave you the incentive in World of Warcraft not to be a dick, right? That was your incentive. If you wanted to risk it, go right ahead. But again, you you were blacklisted from guild, and a lot of late game content, one, required a guild, two, required multiple people to play with you. So if you're an asshole, and again, people would then be like, oh, yeah, I guess I was an asshole. Maybe I should stop. I'm sorry, and people would change, right? But because they got rid of that, and now we have trust and safety councils online. It's like, is it better today as it was back then? I think no, right?
Super annoying. And like I said, people just kept finding new ways to do this no matter what you did. People would follow us around, the Spicy Girl group around, and just constantly ask questions. And you could turn off them being able to direct message you, and then they'd find you. One guy would follow us around, so I'd play my Bard speed song to get away from him. He got a druid to sew him, Spirit of the Wolf, so he could keep up with us. I ended up like moving back and forth and getting him stuck on things because he had set to auto follow us. I'd get him like dragged into a river or stuck on a pillar, so we'd disconnect him and we'd get away.
God.
It always surprised me how many people did this. It wasn't a small fraction, especially early on. There were a lot of people doing it, and their fun seemed to come at everyone else's expense. So that was the worst part of it.
Yeah, and again, cheaters is probably the worst offenders of these. I mean, griefing is one thing, right? Just trying to get that slight rise out of someone until they de-aggro you, right? And try to be an asshole to someone else. But then cheaters come in and just ruins the dynamic for everyone.
It wasn't just that they griefed and had fun. Part of what they were doing was to make the game unfun for other people. And I got griefed once in EverQuest. Somebody did a thing where they tricked me into doing a group teleport with them, saying they pay me on the other end, and then they didn't, and on the other end they tried to get me killed by dragging some guards onto me. And I got away, but it leaves this bad taste in your mouth, like, oh, these people are bad online. And once griefing hits anyone in your group, it affects the whole group. You log in thinking you're going to do a dungeon, and somebody got griefed and lost their gear, and now you can't do this dungeon until you go on all these side quests to try to re-gear them.
Yeah, and again, it's playing games online. Like, I always found the online to be probably one of the most universal and what's the word I'm looking for? Like, if you're in the bumfuck nowhere in Kansas, you're playing unifying, right? Because the bumfuck of nowhere Kansas person is playing with someone from Saudi Arabia, which is playing from someone from Botswana, which is playing with someone from Indonesia, and it's very unifying. But there's a level of dehumanization that happens when you're staring at a screen, right? So you just need to get this rise off of being an asshole, and like in this case, he got away. But it's like, really, I really had that happen to me. Like, fuck sakes, man.
Later MMOs have gotten better at this, but again, people are clever and they still find ways of griefing. And then the later one was, the last one I want to talk about was online groups always seem to attract the most toxic player bases. Or maybe single player games have toxic player bases, but they just can't interact with you.
No, it's mainly multiplayer games. Like, again, if you have that community aspect, you will have that, inevitably you'll have groups of people that come into the community that seeks other people that think like them, act like them, look like them, talk like them, right? And you have these with, like, community managers, right, and Helldivers, and those, like, community managers, and any like, whether it's a Warhammer 40k fandom, you have these people in Star Wars fandoms, you have, like, people that just effectively ghettoize and group together, and they choose enemies and they go and harass them, right? And you have these targeted campaigns that happen online. And again, the internet's a good force for good, but it's a tool. If that tool is used for evil, then it's always on the person using it. It's not on the tool, in my opinion.
But the multiplayer games do seem to attract the worst ones, and it's not just online where they're say and do all these horrible things. That you go to the, community boards and online forums and stuff,
Yep.
and people are just being awful there. And I know a lot of you have that lens of all companies are bad, so let's include the companies in this too. There are a lot of toxic companies involved in online games.
Yeah, and again, these are the individuals I said before. Like this, for some reason, this is the audience that companies are catering towards. They're catering towards people who do not consume the product. They're not fans, or if they do, they don't consume it as much as the actual paying customers, the fans, the people who play the games, the people who consume the product, right? The company thinks of these fringe, radical, outspoken weirdos in these communities like they're our audience. Our consumers. It's like, well, no, they're the people you're trying to appease, the ideological individuals you're trying to appease, right? And at the expense of people who play your games, who consume your products, right? This is the problem. And again, this happened with Star Wars, Warhammer 40K, and again, these companies are effectively bending backwards just to cater to these individuals. And as we see now, at least with Ubisoft, this is coming at the detriment of the company itself. Companies are now finding out, hey, these odd individuals, these ideological leeches, they're not our consumers. If they do play our game, it's tangential. Like, it's not because they care, right? They only have an ideology, and they only view fiction. They view fiction like it's reality, but they view fiction through the ideological lens, not through the lens of entertainment or a product.
I mean, you pay to buy the game, and then you have to pay to have a subscription to play it online, and the game is useless by itself. Then you have to pay to buy DLC, and when new stuff comes out, your group has to all have it, or you can't do it. And then they add microtransactions in on top.
Yep.
So for cool clothing or armor appearances or mounts, and it's just money, 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 and it seemed like the online community has just attracted the worst of both players and companies. So probably by the mid 2010s, I've just tapped out of all of this. I've just said I don't want to do this anymore. It coincides a little bit with when I left Carbine in 2011, and over the next few years, as I was playing these online games, I realized I don't have to be here anymore. I can't even pretend I'm doing research for my jobs because I don't have to do this. So I just stopped. And now, except for very occasional limited multiplayer games, things like Minecraft or Terraria, as examples of things I played since 2011, and some couch co-op. I love couch co-op. I wish there was more couch co-op games, where you could have someone else on the other controller and either you share the screen or it split screens.
Yeah, a lot of games don't do this anymore. And again, I guess it's to encourage the uh, buying other like multiple consoles and buying of multiple games. And again, m- most people will buy a game for themselves and their friends, and this is fine if they like the game. But again, just couch co-op has having that social aspect of gaming should translate also to your house and the people around you as much as it does. You playing with people halfway on the other side of the world through using the internet as the Stargate, per se. In most games, again, the reason why this isn't done is again to incentivize the buying of multiple consoles, multiple games. you could argue that it is greed. And again, for Xbox, for a little bit, they've kind of threw away people that didn't have an always online connection. This is one of the downfalls of the Xbox One is the fact that they tried to one lean away from the gamer and consumer just wanted to be entertainment console, but two only cater towards a small select group of people at the time that well I'd say I don't I'd say a lot of people had the internet, right? But again, there's still that demographic of people that didn't. And I was like, okay, well, what do I have? Well, according to Xbox, it's like, well, I guess you can just stick with the 360. Like, don't bother getting the One because Xbox One will always be online. And it's like, well, what the fuck, man?
Games like that used to be super fun, and when you're playing with someone who's right next to you, you're not going to grief each other. At least, not the people I play with.
Yeah.
So because of that, now as of mid 2020s, I'm almost exclusively offline single player games, and I know I'm not alone in this. I don't know what the fixes are for this, because no matter what companies implement, there seem to be players who are clever and circumvent it. And like I said, it's not just the players. A lot of companies are doing things that I'm just like, I don't want to take part in this anymore.
Yeah, and again, you also have AFKers, people that leech, right? But that's I play a lot of like games like Warframe that are multiplayer, but I mostly play with randos, right? Same thing with the First Descendant. Again, the people I used to play the First Descendant with, they hot jumped ship because, well, I mean, the nature of the game. I still play it just so I can grab the new thing, then leave. Yeah, I play like Warframe. I farm out the new shit, level up the new shit, put a couple formas in it, then I dip. Coming back occasionally for weeklies, but other than that, I mean, there's really no. I don't like unless they come with like they're going to drop some fat DLC, maybe December, but before until then, it's like But I absolutely understand that. Like some people are just okay, single player, offline, single player experiences. Some people like me, well, they do play online games, but mostly alone. And some people again, then you have the demographic that plays gotcha games and that, but it's completely understandable because again, like you said, the companies they if you're not if you're not shoving out USD, they don't care, right? They're in every aspect of their games is to milk you with more and more and more money. That's why everything's a remake, everything's a remaster, everything's a prequel, everything's a sequel. Very few companies, AAA companies, take risks. They want to do the safest and the most cost-effective thing possible, and sometimes it comes at the cost of the gamer because it's like, well, no, I don't want to play the 12th Assassin's Creed. I don't want to play the 19th Call of Duty, right? Like, some people just don't want to do that. I mean, there are people that will want to do that, but I mean, and even multiplayer games like multiplayer games used to have good like you had the good single player and the multiplayer was the icing on the cake, but now it seems like multiplayer is the focus and the single player is just like there, I suppose.
I don't want to play a game that's constantly upselling me on new DLCs and new items. I mean, what's it going to be next? Patches that you have to pay for?
Yeah.
It's become kind of a gaming nightmare for me.
Yeah, Total Warhammer 3 is fucking terrible with that. Like, you have to pay for, like, these content packs, which are both patches and content and, updates that are like 12, and it could be extra units, extra mechanics, And if you don't pay for this, I mean, the base game is fine, but if you play competitively, right, and if you want all of the content, like, you have to pay, you have to shove out that sweet USD. Now, again, I got all that when it was on like 50% off, but it's a lot. And again, it says it's a 50 gig game, but it demands twice that much for at least for me to download. It's like, what the fuck?
So I just play offline single player games now.
Yeah, yeah. I think most people are now on this, and it's for many reasons, but it's just, again, it's like the dynamic of the games have changed away from good single player stories with an additive of multiplayer to having season passes, having microtransactions, having DLC, having, content and cosmetic packs that you have to pay for, right? Having seasonal shit. And it's like it's in almost every single, and even like the first Descendant, though. I don't care to interact with it, but it's there for a reason, and people do. And if it's unintrusive, I don't care. But you have a game like Once Human where the seasonal aspect is the game, effectively, right? Same thing with DayZ, where the seasonal aspect and the server wipes happen seasonally, and after that you have to play it all over again. Like, that's the type of stuff I don't really care about. But yeah, I mean, this is a good video. I'm surprised I didn't get any ads. I thought I was subscribed. But yeah, I mean, and this is from the man, the mouth, the motherfucker himself. It's a real shame that many younger people will simply never have the opportunity to experience and enjoy the joy of online play in an actual fun environment that isn't geared towards squeezing every possible penny from them. I mean, there are games like that, but I mean, if we're talking the AAA scene, yeah, I'd say a lot of them will experience this and get roped into this, right? And they'll have their perception skewed because it's like, okay, it didn't used to be like that, right? Like, I remember the time when you paid $50 and you got the whole game, right? And you had expansion passes, but they're like half the price. But they were effectively a new game, a whole new game, if you take content into consideration, right? I think FOMO being almost weaponized against the player in a lot of modern multiplayer games make me burn out on them pretty fast. Yeah, and it's like you always have the daily logins, you always have the seasonal shit, then you have your weeklies for the season pass, you know. And again, the point is, it's how, again, I said this in the first Descendant, it's how you interact with, like, don't feel you have to get that daily or you have to get that weekly, right? Because you're going to burn yourself out. Again, that's why I haven't burnt out from the first Ascendant yet. It's because, again, I don't feel the need to get the new Ultimate as fast as possible. It's like I grind out 10 amorphs, I crack them open. If I get the piece, I do, and move on. If I don't, I don't. I fuck off until tomorrow. So I grind out 10 more, and I crack open 10 more again. And because of how I interact with it, it's just, I don't get burnt the fuck out. The reason I don't play MMOs anymore, one, there's no endpoint. You end up being a slave to the game. Two, video games accomplishments are completely hollow. You need to spend a lot of time to make any progress. This repetition leaves me feeling hopeless and empty. The more I do it, and five, despite you telling yourself your online friends are real, They just they just aren't. I am a slut and agoraphobic, and MMOs are too much of a waste of time even for me. Yeah, and again, it's odd because now many mobile games do the same thing, but again, mobile games give you what you want: good gameplay, good story, good character assets, emphasis on the ass, right? And many MMOs just don't really like Blizzard. Like WoW doesn't do this anymore, right? Like Diablo, the new one doesn't do that. Like they feel like this, right? I miss old in-person LA LAN parties. Yeah, until someone smacks the fucking table and disconnects everyone on that landline because they're pissed off, and now you want to throw hands at them. I mean, but hey, that was part of the party. Yeah, I'm 38 and basically I only play single player games, story driven co op games, no competitive multiplayer whatsoever. Yeah, and again, For Honor was such a good concept, but then they started releasing characters that were good at everything. Like you have a character named Black Prior, which has a counter everything button. They can counter unblockables, it can counter shoves, it can counter heavy, it can counter everything, right? You know, I played the fucking Highlander, but the Highlander actually taught you to play the fucking game. Same thing with Centurion when he also came out. Those characters, yeah, they were when they first came out, they were broken when people didn't really understand. But then once people started understanding it, obviously they nerfed them. I think they buffed the Highlander. You know, if you know how to play the game, you can counter them, right? If you understand the game. What's it going to be next? Patches that you pay for. Can definitely think of some day one DLCs that's felt like that. Yeah? Yep. I really enjoy co-op games with no PvP system. Played many Deep Rock Galactic games with randoms and never got griefed. Everyone is usually friendly, helping, and cheering each other for rock and stone fellow miners. Yeah, I think I do this with Warframe. Like, there's an entire community on Warframe that's specifically built around helping newer players, right? And this gets people into the game. Like, this makes people want to fucking play the game. I'm 31 and all my friends play nothing but MP games. MP. Multiplayer games. And they get mad that I'm just not into it anymore. I especially do not like competitive facing games anymore, as I just don't feel like trying that hard. I simply just have a better time playing single player games, getting immersed and having my time feel more respected, but nobody around me seems to understand it. Yeah, I mean, again, blowing off steam after, a day's work is fine, and hell, I'd say even 100% healthy. It's like why people motherfuckers scream at football games, and I could never understand, but I understand that, it in a healthy environment, in a healthy way, it's healthy and completely fine. These reasons are why I feel the disappearance of couch co-op is one of the greatest tragedies of the industry. I straight up am not going to play multiplayer anymore unless the person I'm playing with is in the same room. Yeah, yeah. I mean, me and my friend are playing Ruse Up. I'm trying to get it to fucking work on my work computer because that's why I downloaded it, and I can't fucking move the saves to my other computer. I think I fixed it, but we'll see. Helldivers 2 is the closest game I found in recent times where people mostly just want to have fun. I met played with a lot of people that, with a lot of randos that would just kick you because you're not reading their fucking minds or because you don't have a specific type of loadout. And it's like, okay, it's because of those people's why they're not going to allow you to kick people. So you will have people that just leech, and it's because of them. But yeah, if you're playing with friends, with people on the mic that you know, Helldivers 2 is just a fun game. But, I mean, that's all I gotta say about this. Again, I can play both online and single player, but I mainly just err towards playing single. I play multiplayer games alone, but mainly just stream single player games. But anyway, that's all I gotta say about that. Peace.